In Canada, 8 million people, that's 23% of our population, has hypertension. And approximately 4 million people had diabetes in 2023. That means statistically, if you walk to, say, a cafe, 9 out of every 100 people you pass by would have diabetes. Now, at that cafe, let's say you order a coffee. Do you like coffee? Well, your reaction to coffee differs from the person sitting at the table behind you. This is because we have different taster statuses. There are bitter taste receptors in our mouth known as T2Rs that detect bitterness. I focused on T2R38 as it is a highly studied receptor among the 25 T2Rs in humans. Mutations in T2R38 classify humans into super tasters, tasters, or non-tasters based on the amount of bitterness they perceive. Super tasters taste a lot of bitterness, tasters taste some bitterness, and non-tasters taste very little bitterness. My hypothesis is that taster status determines susceptibility of an individual to chronic health conditions. Super tasters are sensitive to bitterness and may increase the salt intake to mask bitterness, potentially raising blood pressure. On the other side of the scale, non-tasters are less affected by bitterness, so they might overeat due to reduced sensitivity. I performed a genetic analysis to check different DNA images of super tasters, tasters, and non-tasters. I used a QIAGEN kit to extract DNA from 22 saliva samples of adults with a SouthAsian background. The isolated DNA was amplified by a polymerase chain reaction in 2 stages to ensure efficient resource use. Once the DNA samples are amplified, they are digested with a restriction enzyme, FNU4HI. This enzyme identifies an extra cut site at position 631 in the taster T2R38 gene, distinguishing it from the non-taster variant. DNA is negatively charged, so when put in the electrophoresis, it moves down and creates band patterns. At the end, I checked DNA images using an imager to see band patterns for super tasters, tasters, and non-tasters. Additionally, I conducted a population-based analysis where a phenylethiocarbamide paper test was used to determine the perceived taster status among 61 South Asian adults aged between 18 and 62 years. I obtained ethics approval from the Department of Community Health Sciences from the University of Manitoba. I used a questionnaire with both open-ended and closed-ended questions about health history, diet, and behaviors. Responses were analyzed using Microsoft Excel and SPSS software.
I don't feel any taste at all.
Really? Nothing?
Yeah, nothing.
I've heard so
it's
many
not
different
bitter,
things.
It's not bitter either.
Wow.
So there's no taste.
What
Is there something wrong with me?
No. What are your food preferences?
My food preferences are basically in the sweet side. Like biscuits, not much in bread, donuts, I love, chocolate, ice cream, pancakes,
I love ice cream.
milkshakes, all the good food, all the stuff that tastes good, which is supposed to be bad for you, that's what I like. Anything that I don't like, it tastes bad. It's good for you. That's the contradiction in foods, right? If the food's tasting really good, it may not be good for you.
Yeah. Oh, what about bitter and sour and salty
And the
stuff?
bitter side, I like broccoli. Broccoli is one of my favorites. And the bitter vegetables, broccoli is my favorite. But that's a pretty big contrast from sweets to bitterness.
What about sour and salty?
Sours and salty. No, my palate doesn't agree with the salts. So,
Really?
No, my palate is sweet. So every palate is different, right? So mine is more tuned to sweet than salts.
Yeah.
So I prefer basically chips here, but you have the crackers
Chips are
or something
good.
like
Chips
that.
are
bitter for me. Yeah.
Oh, it's bitter. Okay, tell me about your food preferences.
I don't like any of the sweet stuff. I do not like ice cream. I sometimes like chocolates here and there, like milk chocolates. I do not like broccoli or any of the bitter stuff, but I love salty stuff like chips, peanuts, etc. Salted peanuts, etc.
Thank you. Figure 1 shows the different cleaving patterns of all the DNA samples I worked with. Altogether, there were 22 samples and 50% were tasters. Taster status was left undetermined for the rest of the samples due to a lack of a sufficient DNA concentration. This result is analogous to research across the world. Figure 2 shows the cleaving pattern for supertasters and non-tasters. As you can see, the supertaster sample moved slightly lower than the non-taster sample. This is because the supertaster sample had the extra cut site, as I said previously. The supertaster sample was smaller, so it had less friction and could move faster than the non-taster. Table 1 shows the questionnaire results according to taster status. Among male and female respondents, a significant number of adult males reported being a taster of PTC. Figure 4 and Figure 5 show the relationship between taster status and hypertension and the relationship between taster status and diabetes, respectively. Figure 4 showed that supertasters had a 1 in 3 chance of being diagnosed with hypertension, compared to non-tasters who were less likely to suffer from this disease. However, the hypertension data from Figure 4 did not reach statistical significance. This could be due to a low sample volume. As expected, a majority of tasters and supertasters were non-diabetic. There was a statistically significant relationship between taster status and diabetes, with a 90% accuracy rate. This shows that the hypothesis was correct. Non-tasters are more likely to have diabetes compared to supertasters and tasters. As you can see here, 64% of respondents perceived to be a taster, which is slightly higher than globally reported values, whereas 21% of respondents were non-tasters, which is slightly lower than the global average. This can be due to a bias of the PTC taste strip test. However, the genetic analysis of T2R38 showed that 50% of the participants had the taster genotype, in agreement with globally reported values. This study aims at motivating children and adults to choose what they're eating more cautiously. This would have a positive effect on their nutritional and food consumption habits, which directly relates to their health. Furthermore, eating healthy reduces the likelihood of getting chronic conditions, such as diabetes and hypertension, which then results in lower numbers of coronary heart disease, stroke, and premature death. In 2020, heart disease and stroke killed around 4 times as many Canadians as COVID-19. Many deaths could be avoided if diabetes and hypertension was less common. In the future, I would like to perform DNA sequencing, which I could not do this time. The lab I worked at did not have that facility. Besides, certain ethics approvals are required for DNA sequencing. I would also like to focus on other chronic conditions, such as asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. In the future, I'd analyze the impact of genetic disposition in current government policies and legislation. Health is wealth. Make your health a priority.